Can you imagine a nation taking a bold stand against one of the world's superpowers, only to find itself teetering on the brink of disaster? This is the gripping reality unfolding between Venezuela and the United States.
Recently, Venezuelan fighter jets flew dangerously close to a U.S. Navy ship stationed in the South Caribbean, seemingly to assert dominance. But this show of force may instead unveil a desperate gamble that could spell the downfall of the nation's leadership.
To grasp the depth of this standoff, we must look back.
Late August marked a pivotal moment when the U.S. dispatched a fleet of naval ships to patrol the South Caribbean, aiming to clamp down on Caribbean drug trafficking, specifically targeting cartels that funnel narcotics into the states.
Just days later, on September 2, a dramatic airstrike obliterated a vessel linked to Venezuela's Tren de Aragua cartel, which claimed the lives of 11 individuals aboard.
President Donald Trump addressed the nation, declaring, "We conducted a kinetic strike against Tren de Aragua narco-terrorists."
This strike resulted in 11 terrorists killed in action.
The aftermath of this deadly strike intensified the already simmering tensions. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro denounced the U.S. for its attempts at violent regime change.
He pled for respect towards Venezuela's sovereignty, while the U.S. maintained its position, dismissing Maduro's claim of legitimacy.
"The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela," said Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary.
The clouds of war were visibly gathering. Feeling increasingly cornered, Maduro made an audacious move just days later.
Under his orders, 2 F-16 fighter jets flew perilously close to the USS Jason Dunham, a formidable Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. Commonly acknowledged as one of the most powerful warships, the Dunham's mere presence represents a symbol of military might.
Ironically, the very jets being used for Venezuela's assertion of strength were American-made. It's a stark contrast, highlighting just how far relations have plummeted since the days when Venezuela was the proud first South American nation to operate F-16 fighters. Those jets once filled Venezuelan skies with pride, their engines roaring like the thunder of a powerful storm. But with recent political erosion, their glory days have become a distant memory. Although they stand as relics of a bygone era, their existence is now fueled by desperation. Many of these aircraft are aging, possibly falling into disrepair, yet they have been crucially upgraded through mysterious back-channel deals. Amid talks of dwindling air power, is the continued operation of these jets a show of bravery, or a grasping at straws by a regime in decline?
As the propellers of the F-16s sliced through the Caribbean air, the stakes of this confrontation escalated. The U.S. Department of Defense released verified footage of the flyover incident, a potent reminder of a growing military face-off.
Amid the unfolding drama, questions linger: how far will Venezuela's leadership go to assert dominance? At what cost comes a display of bravado in the face of overwhelming military power?
The tides have turned ominously, and nobody can predict the next move in this dangerous game of chess between two nations on the brink.
Will it spiral into chaos, or will wisdom prevail?
In a world where power struggles ignite fierce confrontations, the recent events between Venezuela and the United States have taken an unexpected twist. Imagine the tension in the air as Venezuelan fighter jets soared defiantly over a U.S. Navy warship last month.
What could have been a display of strength turned into a catastrophic miscalculation, one that could plunge Venezuela into deeper turmoil. To grasp this escalating conflict, we must journey back to late August when the U.S. deployed a fleet of naval vessels to the South Caribbean Sea, just off Venezuela's coast. This was not a mere show of force, it was part of an aggressive campaign against the drug cartels that have plagued the region. Then came a shocking airstrike on September 2, aimed directly at a vessel linked to the Tren de Aragua cartel, resulting in the deaths of 11 individuals on board. The U.S. president boldly declared this operation a decisive strike against narco-terrorists, sending a clear message that the U.S. would not tolerate the drug trade. But what followed was even more explosive. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, feeling cornered and threatened, mobilized his military. He accused the U.S. of trying to orchestrate regime change, an assertion met with denial from Washington. The stakes were rising. Maduro insisted, the United States should abandon its violent plans and respect our sovereignty. Yet, the U.S. response remained firm, dismissing Maduro's leadership as illegitimate and labeling his regime a narco-terror cartel. Then, the tension hit a climax on September 4. Maduro made a shocking decision. He ordered 2 F-16 fighter jets to fly directly over the USS Jason Dunham, a warship named after a fallen Marine hero.
These jets, once symbols of pride for Venezuela, were now part of a dangerous game of chicken. The roar of their engines echoed across the Caribbean, a sound that sent chills down the spines of military personnel on both sides. The irony of Venezuela showcasing its strength using US-made aircraft was palpable. Once allies, the two nations had become bitter adversaries. The F-16s, once a source of pride, had become symbols of a fractured relationship. Despite being over 3 decades old, these jets still represented a powerful legacy, showcasing Venezuela's military history and its former ties with the US. But the question remains, how far will Maduro go to assert his power? As tensions simmer and military posturing heightens, the world watches with bated breath. The next move could tip the scales, leading to unforeseen consequences. What happens next in this high-stakes standoff? In a shocking twist of international tension, the leader of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, made a daring and potentially reckless decision that could reshape the geopolitical landscape. Under mounting pressure and perceived threats from the United States, he commanded 2 of Venezuela's F-16 fighter jets to execute a provocative flyover of the USS Jason Dunham, a formidable warship stationed in the Caribbean. This Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, named in honor of a heroic Marine who sacrificed his life during the Iraq War, represents the strength of U.S. naval power. The 2 F-16s, a remnant of a long-abandoned era of cooperation, traversed the skies above the USS Jason Dunham, part of a larger show of force that left the U.S. Defense Department scrambling to assess the implications. Clear video footage of the incident was released, fueling debates over the legitimacy of such provocations. And while Venezuelan media outlets promoted tales of a successful display of military might, questions lingered. Could this audacious act of defiance backfire dramatically on Maduro and his government? It is somewhat ironic that Venezuela, once a proud owner of advanced military aircraft purchased from the United States, would now use those very jets to challenge American authority. The history of Venezuela's military relationship with the U.S. is rich, dating back to a time when Caracas was the first nation in South America allowed to acquire F-16s, called Vipers, under warm diplomatic ties that have long since faded. The initial sale, part of the 1982 agreement, brought 16 single-seat F-16 as an 8 two-seat F-16BS into the Venezuelan arsenal. With the roar of jet engines echoing in the Caribbean breeze, the world held its breath. What would the U.S. response be? Would this reckless maneuver lead to an escalation of tensions, or was it merely a desperate act from a leader cornered by the shadows of his governance? The air was thick with anticipation. The story begins with Venezuela's once proud fleet of fighter jets, the F-16s, known as Vipers, that soared above South America for decades, representing military strength. These aircraft, acquired between 1983 and 1985, served as a source of national pride, bolstered by the delivery of advanced missiles, significantly enhancing their air force's capabilities. They swiftly replaced older planes and became instrumental in operations against internal threats. Fast forward to November 1992, when the F-16s found themselves in the epicenter of a political storm during a military coup attempt against President Carlos Andrés Pérez. Loyal pilots took flight in their jets, showcasing their prowess by downing an OV-10 Bronco, a clear sign of power in the chaotic skies. Amidst the upheaval, there were plans to expand the F-16 fleet. The U.S. expressed approval for these enhancements, believing in a strong partnership with Venezuela. But this narrative took a sinister turn in 1999 with Hugo Chávez's rise to power, leading Venezuela down a path of fractured relations with the U.S. As alliances shifted closer to China and Russia, an arms embargo suffocated Venezuela's military ambitions, effectively grounding their dreams. Chávez even went so far as to threaten selling these formidable jets to rivals like Iran, marking a dramatic pivot in international relations. Now, years later, as Nicolas Maduro leads the country, the situation has drastically deteriorated. Not only has he faced accusations of election fraud and human rights abuses, but he has also navigated a humanitarian crisis that has driven millions from their homeland. Despite this, remnants of the original F-16s remain in Venezuela's arsenal, though their condition has waned over time due to a lack of parts and support from the United States. In a surreal twist, the nation has turned to unconventional sources to maintain its fleet, even acquiring Israeli technology to breathe life into aging aircraft. It's ironic that the very fighter jets, once symbols of their alliance with America, are now instruments of defiance flying under the banner of a regime that has been isolated from the international community. As the Venezuelan Air Force embraces these jets amidst modernization attempts with Russian aircraft, one questions how long can they sustain this facade of power? The flight paths of these F-16s now symbolize an unwavering spirit of resistance, but the sky may not be as forgiving for a regime clinging to remnants of the past.
Will these aging Vipers continue to soar, or will they become mere relics of a bygone era, echoing the challenges of a nation at odds with its fate?
The turmoil in Venezuela has deepened under Maduro, whose rise to power in 2013 has seen the nation spiral into chaos.
Accusations of election fraud, connections to drug cartels, and rampant human rights violations have plunged the country into a catastrophic humanitarian crisis.
Nearly 8 million Venezuelans have fled their homeland, seeking refuge from the crumbling infrastructure and pervasive violence. Amid such turmoil, Venezuela clings to a vestige of its once proud military strength, the F-16 fighter jets acquired decades ago. Though these aircraft have seen better days, the government has reportedly turned to the black market for parts to keep its fleet operational. They've also sought assistance from Israel, modifying these jets to carry advanced armaments like the Israeli Python 4 air-to-air missiles. Additional systems for navigation and targeting have arrived as Venezuela's military seeks any advantage in the increasingly hostile landscape. The remaining F-16s are stationed in El Libertador, Maracay, under the command of the Grupo Aéreo de Caza 16, known as Los Dragones. Nonetheless, the fleet has dwindled significantly. Current estimates indicate only 3 single-seat F-16s and 1 two-seat F-16B remain. Venezuela's Air Force now leans towards the more modern Russian Su-30 Mk2V flanker jets, which have been seen as superior in capability compared to the aging Vipers. Yet, in a surprising and bold decision, Venezuela chose to provoke tensions further. Their F-16s buzzed above a U.S. Navy vessel, igniting a fierce backlash from the Department of Defense. The incident marked a dangerously escalating moment in the region. Would this gamble pay off for Maduro, or was it a reckless provocation that could lead to severe consequences? As whispers of military confrontations loom ever closer, the stakes could not be higher. Tensions are on the rise, and the situation in the Caribbean just took a dramatic turn. Imagine this: Venezuelan fighter jets, agile and defiant, soaring over the vast blue waters, challenging the might of the U.S. Navy. What could possess Venezuela to engage in such a reckless display of bravado? This audacious move, aimed to show strength, may just mark the beginning of a perilous chapter for the nation and its controversial leadership. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the Caribbean, the U.S. Navy was on high alert. Last month, a fleet of American ships was deployed to the region, part of an unprecedented campaign against South American drug cartels. On September 2, escalating the stakes, a U.S. airstrike obliterated a vessel tied to the infamous Tren de Aragua cartel, leaving 11 lives lost. President Trump confirmed the action with a fiery post, labeling the cartel as a notorious terror organization under Nicolas Maduro. Did Venezuela believe they could retaliate without consequences? In a twist, Maduro mobilized his forces, accusing the U.S. of orchestrating a violent regime change. His rhetoric rang through Caracas, calling for respect and sovereignty. But can words shield a country already in turmoil? As the world held its breath, Trump made it clear America wasn't taking this lightly. When asked about the consequences of further Venezuelan provocations, his message was crystal clear: if they fly in a dangerous position, they'll be shot down. Within hours, the U.S. ramped up its defense. 10 F-35 fighter jets, the hallmark of American air superiority, were dispatched to Puerto Rico. With unmatched speed and firepower, each jet epitomized a technological pinnacle, capable of outmaneuvering any adversary. How would Venezuela respond when faced with such military superiority? As if to answer that question, Maduro sent 2 F-16 jets hurtling through the sky, a daring flyover of the USS Jason Dunham, a stalwart among U.S. warships. The roar of the engines echoed, a stark contrast to the calm Caribbean waters beneath. Did Venezuela understand they were risking a dangerous game? This brazen act provoked an immediate statement from the U.S. Department of Defense, calling it a provocative interference with their counter-narcotics operations. The warning was clear and unyielding: further provocations would not go unanswered. The world watched, riveted by this tension-filled high-stakes drama. Would Maduro's bravado lead to catastrophe, or could it somehow serve a deeper purpose in the chess game of international relations? The answer remained elusive, the stakes ever higher, as both nations braced for the next move in this charged standoff. In an unexpectedly explosive geopolitical saga, tensions have reached a boiling point between Venezuela and the United States. Just last month, U.S. Navy vessels descended into the South Caribbean Sea, engaging in a fierce campaign against drug trafficking in South America. But when Venezuelan fighter jets decided to challenge one of these warships, it became clear the stakes were higher than anyone had anticipated. As the U.S. ramped up its military presence in the region, dispatching warships to combat the narco-trafficking network led by the Tren de Aragua cartel, they didn't just send a message, they executed a devastating airstrike on a vessel linked to these cartels. This attack led to the deaths of 11 individuals and ignited a firestorm of outrage from Venezuelan leaders, who proclaimed their sovereignty was under threat.
The question looms, was this an act of strength or a desperate gamble? Fast forward to September 4, 2023, when Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro unleashed a bold move by ordering 2 F-16 jets to fly perilously close to the USS Jason Dunham, one of America's most formidable warships. This single act of defiance was loaded with irony.